Hi everyone, welcome to the TMS podcast. And today we have Marcus with us. Welcome to the podcast, Marcus. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you, Monika. I'm very well. How are you?
I am also great. Thank you for asking. And it's great to have you here. So, Marcus, I really wanted to dive right into who you are, your parents, your family, because I really love understanding people who they are right now. So, let's just dive into that.
Cool. Sounds good. So a little bit of background on me. So right now, I live in the UK. I
Yeah.
have been living in the UK for about 21 years now, but I didn't always live in the UK. So I grew up in Brazil.
Yeah.
Then when I was about, I think I was 19, which probably speaks for my age now. If you do the maths, coming in 19, being here for 20 years. I decided to come to the UK. So I was going to university in Brazil, and I was doing computer science. But I've always felt like computer science wasn't back then. It
Hmm.
didn't feel like the right thing for me, even though I've been a developer. Like I had my first job as a developer when I was 15, but I've been writing code since I was about 7. Um,
Really?
yeah, yeah. So I started very early. I had this
Ex-
my dad bought me this secondhand computer which had basic on it, and he bought this computer with the intuit of play games with it. But then because it was a secondhand computer, it came with a bunch of things on it, like a bunch of disks back then, and one of those disks was basic. And obviously I had no idea what basic was, so I kind of start to play with it. And back then for me it was like, this is interesting, I can write some codes and it turns into something. And
Yeah.
then, kind of like, long story short, I kind of like got into this. And then I was the type of kid who would buy those like computer magazines and like type all the codes and everything. And then, it would go wrong, and then you type everything again, only to, like, the week after you buy the next magazine and it goes, well, actually there was something wrong with that code. So you've been debugging something for a week to then realize that the magazine itself was wrong. Sometimes I was wrong as well. But yeah, so I grew up and I've been like a software engineer since then went into computer science, but computer science never really felt like very fulfilling to me, mainly because it was a lot of theory. Okay, I never try and kind of like discourage people from like going to university, because the kind of like the next stages of my life was I dropped out of computer science and I came to the UK. And then a year and a half later I decided that I was gonna go back to like finish my course, but my choices here were, would I go back to Brazil to finish computer science, or could I do it from the UK? And then I did it from here. So like I finished here. So I finished my degree. I was already working as a software engineer. So I worked at a few different companies in the UK. I worked in Brussels as well. So I was working for the European Union for a little bit as a contractor. And then at one point, I've always liked to be very close to the educational sides of things. Okay, so my mom was a school teacher, and I've always liked the educational sides of things. So I've always been involved with both communities, meetups, and conferences. And there was this one time I was speaking at a conference, and this was in 2013, I think. I was speaking at a conference, and someone came to me and said, I like what you did there. So, and this was back then I was an Android developer. So someone came to me and said, I like what you did there. Have you ever thought about developer relations? And back then I was like, I don't even know what developer relations is. This
Yeah.
was 2013. Okay, so I was
Yeah.
like, I don't even know what this is. And then this person kind of like explains to me what is developer relations, and I'm like, wait, and I like, that's a job and I get paid to do it? And he goes, yeah, it's a job. And like, in fact, so this person worked at Google in developer relations back then. And he goes, yeah, it's a job, and like, it's what I do. And I'm like, oh wow, because like I've been speaking at these conferences and going to events and everything, but I never really, like, it's always been just me paying for everything, or like sometimes the conference will pay for like your travel or something. But the reality is, because I worked as a software engineer, the reality was like everything that I did was kind of like on my own time. If I went to speak at a conference, I would like have time off and everything. Whereas then this person at a conference tells you, no, you can actually do this for a job. So kind of like it started to think about this. And then I started to look at the options out there. Like, what are the companies doing DevRel back then? There weren't that many companies doing it, but the ones that were doing it and the ones that I liked were the ones that I kind of like started conversations with. And one such company was Twilio. So I started talking to Twilio back then. So back then, Twilio was like a 200-person company. So like it was a much smaller company than it is. Yeah, much smaller company than it is right now. Interestingly enough, back then I was learning a new programming language because it's kind of like the thing about software engineering is like it is my hobby as well. Okay. Like, there's not a day that goes by without me kind of like writing some code. Like, my GitHub has all my code and everything. And I was learning a new programming language called Dart back then. And because I was trying to learn Dart, I was like, well, maybe the way for me to kind of like learn how to use Dart is if I write like a little SDK for one of the APIs that I like using. And Twilio so happened to be one of the APIs that I liked using. So I wrote a Dart SDK for Twilio. And then someone at Twilio got in touch with me saying, hey, we saw that you did that. And it was someone from the developer relations team. So everything kind of came together. And then, I went to work for Twilio in DevRel. I joined Twilio back in 2014, like I said, when Twilio was like much smaller than it is right now. I was at Twilio until 2021, so I was there for 7 years. Twilio was just under 9,000 people when I left it. So kind of went from like 200 people where you know everyone to like
Yeah.
9,000 people where you know everyone in your country, but not in the
No,
whole company.
right.
So I was at Twilio up until 2021. Back then, I was leading the developer relations team in Europe and Latin America. And I just felt like the right time for me to kind of like, just go and do something else. So I left Twilio and then I joined Circle. And the interesting thing about Circle for me was I wanted to go work with developer relations still, but I wanted to go work with something different. And Circle being in the Web3 space felt different enough. It felt like, okay, so this is, it's not just another API company. Like, it's a completely different space. It's blockchain. It's something that I don't really understand. And I wanted to work with something that I didn't really understand so I could learn something new. So I joined Circle as their director of developer relations. And Circle, like back then, they had never had any DevRel teams. So it was like my job was to very much kind of like figure out DevRel for Circle. And I was at Circle for 2 years, or yeah, just a little over 2 years. And I built their DevRel team from scratch. Okay, so we hired people globally, we hired a bunch of people in a bunch of different places to do developer relations at Circle. And for me, it was always like really interesting because being at Circle and being in a space that was so different, even though some of my experience applied, there was a lot for me to kind of like just still figure out. So it was very exciting to kind of like just try and figure out how things work, how the space works and everything. And then in 2024, so last year, I decided to leave Circle and do something different.
Yeah.
And the something different that I decided to do is what I'm doing right now. So I'm running DevRel Bridge, which is like my DevRel agency as a service. But I've also done like a bunch of building in the process as well. So yeah, that's kind of like my
Yeah, that's so great. Like, you have 20 years of experience in tech, right? And that's really amazing. And you have seen a lot of things that is changing in the market every day. Maybe for you, it's like, oh, this thing is coming back to the market. Maybe that movement also happened. So I just wanted to ask you about like, what do you think, like, as a DevRel perspective, what things that broken and what's going to be the new in the DevRel industry?
um you know, I think this wouldn't be a conversation in 2026 if we didn't talk about AI, okay? Because I think
Yeah.
this is kind of like where everything is going,
Right.
and I actually have a very positive outlook on AI. I know people like to go and say bad things about AI. I know people like to go and say, oh yeah, because like the AI is slop and everything just doesn't look good. Um, But my outlook with AI is a little more positive, where I see AI as a force multiplier rather than something that will just kind of like replace my job in what I do. And I think the reason this is important is when it comes to DevRel, there's so many more things that we as DevRel practitioners can do right now that we could do before, but not as quickly. Okay, so I like one of the things that like has always been super exciting for me when it comes to like doing DevRel is I love working with people. Okay, like I love helping people. I love when someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I have this really hairy problem and like I don't know how to solve it." And my kind of like what I would do in that situation is like I would, write a little demo or something. So like if someone came to me and said, "Hey, I'm trying to do this thing," I would like write a demo and everything. But also like, you have your time constraints. Okay. Whereas I feel like with the advent of having cursor, having like Claude codes and everything, doing those things is so much easier right now. But also I feel like the developers have so many more resources on their tool belts to kind of like solve those issues than they did in the past. Okay, so I feel like the one shift here is um, DevRel will stop being support for a little bit, and it will be much more like, you just need to make sure that when developers find your tools, like when they find, whatever it is that you're working with, that they have the best possible experience. Okay, but also that the machines that find your tools or your content also have the best possible experience. And this goes with like, I think people are calling it like, there's SEO and then there's the GEO, which is, your kind of like SEO that is optimized for AI. I feel like that is going to be a shift where right now you're not necessarily just creating content that is oriented to like a developer being successful, but you're creating content that is oriented to maybe an AI or an LLM model being successful, but also you're giving those developers or maybe the AI the best possible experience with your product. So I think the answer here for me is like, just the change in the experience and the improvements on the experience. Okay, and this could be like, improvements on your docs, improvements with your developer experience, with how your SDKs work. That for me is going to be the big kind of like paradigm shift on developer relations, like going forward.
Yeah, I'm agree because there's a lot more in DevRel role because what I see when I also look into the DevRel job descriptions, it's always like it's different for the different companies and there's a lot more you can, experiment. That's the, I think, role where you can experiment the things where you can experiment or add something, okay, how we can make it more better and how we can add the strategy here to things go viral or something like that. But I really wanted to like you said that you were working with the APIs in Twilio and then you shifted to Circle and you were working with the blockchain. So that shift now everything is about the AI and every company is also adapting the AI and they also need people who can talk about the AI and also the product. So this transition from one tech to other like another to manage that like
Yeah, so the most successful DevRel people I've ever met are people who are able to adapt very quickly and people who have this kind of like this eagerness to learn different things. Okay. And so everyone that I see who's doing DevRel on the AI era right now, like the people who are doing really well are the people who have kind of like been through all of these changes. And don't get me wrong, like, I think as sentient beings, like as human beings, like we don't always like changes, okay? Because changes can be scary. Changes can be like, I think no matter how you cut it, people love to say, "Oh yeah, I love changes," but it's like, the reality is like changes they can be uncomfortable, okay? But I think the important thing here is like just being able to adapt to those changes, okay? Because the reality is like, everything is changing. I'm sure that if you're in sales, the way that you do sales right now with AI is different than the way that you did sales, like, maybe 2 years ago, just because people have more access to information. People can use AI to do their own research. Okay, like I was having a conversation with an accountant the other day, and there's like an accountant for my business, and this accountant like at one point he turns to me and goes like, "How do you know about all this?" And I'm like, "I don't. This is all from Claude." Like, I just went to Claude and I asked, like, I kind of like asked it a bunch of questions, and I learned from there. And it was like, "Yeah, but what you're saying is kind of like spot on." And I'm like, "Yes, because LLMs, like, they kind of know a lot."
Right.
So I think the way forwards here is like, the people who are able to adapt, because if I go back to, like, 2014 when I joined Twilio, the focus was very much like, okay, you use APIs, then you use webhooks, and that was kind of it. Okay, so like, you looked at kind of like Twilio's playbook, or you looked at Stripe's playbook, and it was very similar. Like, you use the APIs, then you use webhooks to get notifications, but that's it. And then there was, there was a bit of a change where, the people still used APIs, but it was like no longer just REST APIs. Like, you have different types of APIs, and then you move forwards, and the blockchain kind of like to appear. And now people are talking about the blockchain, and then there's like the purists who talk about the blockchain from like a crypto perspective, but then there's all the people who talk about the blockchain from more of a like a solution perspective. Like, if you want to make sure that things are authorized, signatures are signed, and you want to get visibility of it, like, the blockchain is kind of like the perfect place for it. So what kind of like got me interested in the blockchain back then wasn't so much like the crypto side of it, but it was like the possibilities that it gives you. And then now we're kind of like transitioning into this era of AI. And again, like, what is interesting for me is not the fact that you can sit down in front of cursor and say, create me an application, but it's all the possibilities of like what you can do. Okay, I think there was a post from Greg Eisenberg on LinkedIn, and I think it was from yesterday, where he said there are basically like only a couple of things that separate you now as an individual from being like a very successful person and a multimillionaire. And one of them is like your cursor rules, or your Claude.md, for example, where you have all your contexts and you can build something truly amazing
Right.
without being like a fantastic engineer. Obviously, at one point you will need some engineering, but like, you can build something truly amazing without being like an engineer like me with like 20 years of experience, because all you need is like, you just need the right tools. And
Right.
that for me is kind of like fantastic. Like, I yeah, it just brings me a smile.
Right, because AI, I think what I'm seeing right now, I have people like around me, though they don't have the engineering background and all, they don't know about the tech. But what I'm seeing right now in them, that they have this confidence that they can build the thing, right?
Yeah.
They know about, like, they have the idea and they are like, okay, I know how we can build the thing. And so I'm also, reading some of the tweets. So
Hmm.
they have written that building is going to be very fun. Building is going to be the business. So that's the era we are, entering. And I'm totally agree.
Yeah, I think and I used to talk about this a lot back in my days at Twilio. Like, there was this conversation about build versus buy, okay, which was like, if you're capable of building something, you're probably not it, because you're capable of building it. And then there's all the costs of everything, which is like, yes, you can build something, but also now you have hosting. Also now you have the kind of like the DevOps side of things and everything. And then, with AI, I've seen, and this was it was kind of like mind blowing. It's something that I saw on X, where this guy, he said, well, I had to set up my own server because I wanted to host all the code that AI wrote for me, but I have never set up a server before. So like, I didn't know how to do it. So what I did is I installed Claude on that server, and I asked Claude to set up the server. And I was like, this is like, it's mind blowing, because now you don't necessarily need someone in DevOps to kind of like do that setup for you. Now, don't ask me how good that setup was, okay? Because again, AI has limitations. Like it doesn't necessarily think about all the security patches or anything. And I'm probably not qualified to even talk about this. Um, but just the fact that now, as someone who's never built anything, you can build something and you can say, do you know what? I'm not going to use Vercel. I'm going to go to, I don't know, DigitalOcean. I'll buy a droplet and I'll put Claude on it and I'll just get it to set it up. And now I have a website running. That it's kind of like mind blowing for me.
Yeah, and for me, AI feels like Lego. Like I have a lot of things and I just need to build and I'm having fun. And it's
Yeah.
very satisfying.
Yeah. It's satisfying, but it's also like, it's the thing about you getting something done yourself. Like, it's always best when, it's like I'm not a great DIY person, so I don't know that that's the right analogy, but I'm sure that it feels way more fulfilling when if your wall needs painting, you paint it yourself rather than like paying someone to paint because like, you've done that wall. Now you've accomplished something. Like, it's the sense of accomplishments that you get. And I feel like that is finally coming to the software engineering world, okay? Where, maybe 2 years ago, there was something that you couldn't do. And you see, like, we see this all the time where, like, I saw this yesterday, someone saying, I've had this blog for like the longest time, but like I wasn't qualified enough to actually make changes to it. And now, because I have Cursor, I can make changes to it. And again, like it's that sense of accomplishments. Like, and this wasn't a person saying we don't need engineers anymore, okay? Like, and I don't think that's ever going to happen, okay? Like, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where like we don't need engineers. Like, I know that a few months ago Mark Zuckerberg said that he wasn't ever going to hire an engineer ever again. I can guarantee, Monica, that if you go to like Meta's website and you look at jobs, there's a bunch of engineering jobs there. So I don't think engineering is going to disappear, and neither do I think that this person who fixed their own blog now thinks they're an engineer. Like, and again, like if I put some, I don't know, fluids on my car, like I'm not gonna think I'm a mechanic, okay? Like, yes, I can do things, but I'm not gonna think I'm a mechanic. But it's just that this like being able to do things, like the sense of accomplishment.
Right, because okay, we have built something, but I'm in a consulting firm, and it's
Hmm.
been like 5 years. I work as a consultant, and I work with the data and a lot of the techs. So every time you needs that approval, you can't just say, okay, if something is working 99%, that can go into the production. No, that 1%
Exactly.
very important,
Yeah.
and we need human approval. Okay, something is right, we can do the production level thing. So I'm totally agree with that, because we always need that human touch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the reality is like there are definitely a lot of things, even in DevRel, like there's a lot of things that I used to like do manually before that I don't. And it doesn't mean that I'm not doing that. Like I'll give an example. Like I think with like written content, for example, I look at like ChatGPT or Claude as they're almost like my peers. Where if I'm creating some content or if I'm gonna do a video and I need to come up with a script, I can actually bounce ideas off of Claude or ChatGPT and get feedback. And this is like instantaneous feedback, where in the past, this would be feedback from either a peer who works with me and I will need to get time with them and everything and make sure that, we sit down on an hour meeting so we can talk about it. Or just like, do this asynchronous, like send them an email and say, hey, give me feedback. Whereas like right now, I can get feedback like right now. Like I can get feedback on anything that I'm doing in the next 5 minutes, and it will be good feedback. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the reality of it. It's like you will still get like decent feedback, like good quality feedback.
Yeah, because people are now more productive with the AI. We can say that safely, right? But Marcus, I what I see, you are more close to the product, right? So you are more about how we can make this product successful and how we can apply some strategies so that product can reach to so many people. So I just really wanted to know your advice, like what people can do to launch their product before launching, what kind of strategy they can apply.
Yeah, so I'll tell you like what my strategy is, and my strategy is one that I had to learn the hard way. So I have my own agency, but I also have a SaaS called Linkintel, which we can talk about later. But before building Linkintel, I built three other SaaS products. And the difference between building Linkintel and the other SaaS products I've built is with Linkintel, I didn't build anything until I had some validation, like until I had some feedback from users. The other things that I built because I needed them, which is still a perfectly valid thing to do. Okay. But I built things that were like really important to me at that time. But the reality is, with at least two out of the three other products that I built, they were like really important to me at that time. But if I went and asked someone else, like, hey, do you think you'd use this? People would be like, yeah. Would you pay for it? Probably not. Okay. So I think when you're building products, like the first question that you need to ask is like, is this only useful for me or is this going to be useful for other people? I think um, when you find a match between those two needs is when it's kind of perfect because it's something that will be helpful to you and you're passionate about, and it's also something that will be helpful to your audience or like the people that you're kind of like your ICP. That is when like something it's a kind of like a perfect match.
Right.
So I feel like the mistake that a lot of people do, like I've been, on X, we have this like building public community and there's a bunch of people building a bunch of things. Like it's really cool to see, like it's really interesting to see, but very often you see people first they're building, it's almost like they're building inside a cage, and like they're not talking to anyone, they're just kind of like heads down building it, and then they launch it, and then they get disheartened because like the product doesn't go anywhere. But then the reason a product doesn't go anywhere is because like probably no one needs it. Okay, and this is like it's harsh and it's unfortunate, but it's the reality. Like you built something that was like really important to you, but the reality is like probably no one needs it. And then there's this other side, which is like people actually going and asking the customer. So like when I built Linkintel, I didn't go and build Linkintel. I had the idea, and then I started to ask people around. I started to say, hey, is this something that you would use? But also, is this something that you would pay for? Because people might, I'll use anything, okay? But if you ask me, like, "Oh, would you pay for anything?" The answer is no. Like, I won't pay for anything. So for me, I'd say the first thing is like try and validate your product. And then the second thing, and we're talking about before you launch, the second thing is like just think about who your ICP is, like who's your ideal customer profile, um and who are you going to market this to. Now the reason why this is very interesting and I'm very passionate about this is because in on DevRel Bridge, like on my DevRel side of things for my agency, I come across a lot of founders who didn't really go through this process.
Hmm.
Okay. And sometimes, and this is like it can be a little, I don't know how you think about this, but like I find it a little troubling that sometimes you will meet founders who didn't go through this process, but also they have VC money. So like someone actually believed their idea. Okay, like they haven't really done any validation, but like there was someone in a VC somewhere who said, yes, I am gonna give you 5, 10, $20 million to like go after this idea. And I think some of it is the nature of like they say VCs, they don't necessarily invest in a product, they invest in a founder. Because while the founder may not have the right idea right now, the VCs look at them and go like, well, I think this person, they'll get there. Like they'll get there, and I'm gonna like 5, 10x my money if I invest on this founder right now. And this isn't so much about the product, but I think just getting a little bit of validation before you go and spend like 6 months building something, because it's also like, and speaking for myself, like it's also really disheartening when you go and you launch something, and like you do the preparation, like you do your product hunt launch or something, and then no one votes on it, or like no one pays for it, so no one uses it. And I've been on both sides, okay? Like I've been on the, oh my gosh, no one wants this. and I've been on the, oh my gosh, like I can't believe like so many people actually want this. So I've been on both sides. But I'd say like pre-launch is just make sure you understand like who your users are and make sure you understand like what it is they want.
Yeah, so basically, before launching something, we have to understand how human mind works and what human want and what's the thing you can do so they can pay. So I think that's the main motto. So the main thing everyone is looking for is the leads. How many leads we can generate from these product hunt launch or any launch or whenever we launch our product. So that's the main criteria or main output everyone is looking for, and I think that's the best thing we can, vouch for. Okay, that's what our goal is.
Yeah, I think especially with like product hunts, I think that the understanding has to be that the usage that you get from product hunts, and there's a bunch of like there's a lot of people like talking about this, but like the usage that you get from product hunts, they may not necessarily be your users. Okay, the reality is like there is a finite number of people who go into product hunts, and they're a lot of the times they're kind of the same people. Like,
Right,
I don't know that if you're building, I'll give you like my example again with Linkintel, like Product Hunt, the Linkintel launch on Product Hunt wasn't my best launch. And the reason it wasn't my best launch is because Linkintel as a product is not something that the users of my products like they don't go on products hunt. Like, Linkintel is a LinkedIn product. Like it's a product for LinkedIn. So the best place where I can do marketing is inside LinkedIn.
right,
Okay. And so my launch on product hunts for LinkedIn was like it was okay, but the reality is only a few people who actually signed up through my launch on product hunt actually converted into paying customers. So I think while product hunts is a kind of like it's a really good place for you to get a lot of eyeballs, it's not necessarily the place where your users will come from. Okay, so it's almost like I guess it's almost like if you get I don't know, like if you get like a big like billboard on a very busy place, and a lot of people look at it, it's like it doesn't necessarily mean that the people who go walk in the very busy place are going to be the people who will be using your products. Okay, like you still get the visibility, and the visibility is great. But I also think, a lot of companies and a lot of founders, they put too much emphasis on like, we need to launch on products hunt and we need to be number one products of the day. And because if we do this, we're going to explode. And it's like, it's unlikely that that will happen. Okay. So I think it's worth kind of like people just having that, that awareness.
yeah. So until or unless your customers or user don't use your product, or you should be able to satisfy them. Okay, my product is best, and not just best, usable. It's very easy to use, and that can add value to in your life. So I think that's the best product we can give to the users. And also, Marcus, I can we talk about more Link Intel?
Yeah, yeah. So Linkintel was like interestingly enough, Linkintel for me was a kind of like a request from some of my clients at my agency because um, I feel like every company right now is somewhat focusing on LinkedIn. Like if you think about LinkedIn, like LinkedIn I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, LinkedIn was like the place you go to like get a job.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like people right now use LinkedIn a lot more as a marketing channel, as a place where you can kind of like, discover a company or something. It's not just about jobs. And I kept on getting requests from some of my clients to make sure that they had the right content on LinkedIn. So if this was like a developer company, for example, or like a developer product, they wanted to make sure that they were speaking the right language on LinkedIn, but also to get some like really good analytics on the contents that they were publishing on their company pages. What I mean by uh, company page is so it's not the analytics from like my personal LinkedIn, but it's the analytics from like DevRel Bridge, for example. And they kept on asking for like better analytics. Now, if you go in a company page, like if you go on the analytics on LinkedIn for a company page, the analytics are very limited. And I know that this is something that, LinkedIn has had feedback on before, but I guess they're busy with like other things and it's not something that they fixed. So the analytics are very limited, and they're limited to like, this is your post and it got X many views and it got X many likes or like whatever, but it doesn't go deep into like why it got X many views. It doesn't go deep into like, there's a difference between you making a post at 2 p.m. or at 10 p.m., or there's a difference in like, you making a post that is more about thought leadership versus kind of like product promotion. Like LinkedIn doesn't go into this. So like what Linkintel does is it gives you all that kind of like juiciness of your content. Okay, so it tells you exactly what is going well. It tells you exactly what time you should be making your posts, and it tells you what types of posts that you should be making more. So LinkedIn has like a few different sorts of like they call it buckets, which are basically categories of posts. So like one of them is like I said, like I talked about too. So I talked about thought leadership. There is like product promotion. There is like educational content. There's company updates. And maybe if you are, I don't know, like if you're a company and you will notice that every single time you post at 2 p.m. and it is a product update, it just explodes, like it just goes viral. Like LinkedIn will never surface this for you. Okay. And what my tool like attempts to do is exactly this. So it basically came from like a couple of my customers who said, we just want to get really specific to like what is working because we know it's working.
Yeah.
Like we know that when we post, we get like 200,000 views, but we want to get really specific about like what is working. So we do more of it. And maybe what's not working, we can kind of like not do.
Yeah, correct.
Um, and the idea of Linkintel is this, like, it basically reads out of your analytics and it gives you like a snapshot of like what is working right now and what is the type of content that you can be creating more. Now, there is an AI component to it, which is obviously when it knows that there's a type of content that you should be creating more, it can suggest content for you. Now, with suggestions, I like to be a little like on the cautious side because I never really suggest that anyone goes and kind of like generates content to publish on LinkedIn because it kind of kills the idea of like, you creating like real authentic content. So it suggests content for you. It doesn't have a button that says publish this to LinkedIn. Like I don't it will never have that button because like it kind of goes against my ethos of no, it's one thing if I say to you you should be creating more content about how your engineering team is solving that really complex problem, and it's another thing if I say here's a post, go and publish. Like I don't want that. Like I want you still to kind of like have to think about this. Now if you go from there and you copy that as a prompt and you use it in ChatGPT, there's nothing I can do about it. But on my sides, I like to make sure that people are still kind of like, being creative but I want to give them as much information as I can for them to be successful.
Yeah, I think this is very powerful product because it's not just about the LinkedIn, it's about the all platform. I have been in content on the YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, but that why is missing. I know my content is reaching to people, just the gender is like women or the men. I don't know what kind of people they are,
Yeah,
what's their interest are, right? And that's why is I think so missing, and we are just posting anything whatever comes in my mind. So that's very hectic sometimes because
hmm
you are not like aware okay what you should post. So I think
exactly.
this is very useful product for
Yeah.
the content creator and the companies as well.
Yeah, and like the one thing that I found with this product in general, and it's something that people ask me, which is LinkedIn are very strict with their API usage. So like my product is not yet connected to LinkedIn's API. So like right now, if you want to get analytics, you need to do an export, which is very easy to do from LinkedIn. Like to give credit to them, very easy to do, but you need to do an export and then you need to import this data into my tool, which is a bit of a backwards way of doing things, okay? Because it kind of like just expects things to be connected. But it is something that I'm working on with LinkedIn right now, like to actually get access to their API. So like, in in the next few months, like everything will just be connected. Like, it will be connected to your LinkedIn account. It will kind of like get that information from there and show you like the live data. But it's also something that I had to tackle. And again, it kind of goes back to as a builder, like when you're building something, there are gonna be things that you didn't necessarily think were going to be a problem for you. Like, there are going to be some brick walls, and you just need to know kind of like how to overcome those brick walls. But also, what I really like about this is like it's the challenge. Like, it's something that I need to figure out. Like, did I think that I was gonna be like having conversations with LinkedIn about their API, getting access to it, and no, I didn't. But yeah, it's the challenge, and it's different, and it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, can be the opportunity as well because when I was working with one of the startup name is Ran Mirinda Partners. So my work was is getting the data from hundreds of APIs like Shopify, Binge Ads, and all of
Yeah.
that. They provide their APIs, and you can
Hmm.
access their APIs and get the data. So I also face this like issue with most of the payment apps because I just wanted to get my own data, but it is also very difficult to get my data as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very hectic and you're like you wanted to build something but you don't have the data and how you can access your own data, and that's very hectic. But yeah, opportunity can come and you can build your own API, or you always need some access from these big companies and all. But yeah, we need this platform, and mostly it's not about LinkedIn. We really want a platform where we can see the analytics of all the social medias like YouTube, Twitter, and everything.
I
Like
agree.
everything is there.
Yeah, I agree. And look, it will happen. It is something that I have on my roadmap. I like to add more platforms. I also want to be able to, like, right now, we only focus on company, like specific company pages or like company pages, but I want to change it to also focus on like your personal accounts and everything, because there's this movement right now, which is, I think they're called there's many names, but like some people call it like founder-led growth, which you see a lot of founders actually creating more content on LinkedIn. And not only they create more content, they create higher quality, more authentic content than like company pages, because they're kind of like speaking for themselves. So I do want to add a component of like, you being able to kind of like see your personal account, and you being able to see your like YouTube, and eventually being able to correlate things as well. Because I think, while, I know you have your LinkedIn account, you have your YouTube account, and then, maybe you publish your podcast on like I don't know, Spotify or something. Like the idea of like just being able to correlate this and understand that, okay, so the reason this works on Spotify is because of this. So like maybe at the 15-minute mark is where people just start to drop off. So like what can you do to actually, make sure people stick around? Like, just being able to kind of like look at having this one place where you can look at all the data. It's kind of like that's the dream for me. Like that's where I want to get to.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing because whenever we see okay how to create content for all the platform, because we as a content creator you are creating one content like in video form, but in the video form you can convert this content into the different forms for the tutor, like in text, in the audios, and like I think nowadays all platforms are very important to your business and your personal
Agreed.
brand as well. But Marcus, I really wanted to know what's your favorite platform to post your content, and also what's your favorite one where you get lot of leads.
Definitely LinkedIn
Right.
for both. Again, I guess for Linkintel, LinkedIn is kind of like the straightforward answer because it's kind of perfect. It's like, okay, so you're on LinkedIn, so like you're in the platform that I serve, and yeah, I have this like LinkedIn tool. But I guess from the agency sides of things, like from Deborah Bridges sides of things, LinkedIn is also important because, and it's the one that I get the most kind of like leads from, just because my sweet spot when it comes to the companies I target kind of like tech companies, Series A or B, and that's like LinkedIn is where a lot of the founders at that stage go to right now. Okay. Also, what I find with LinkedIn is I don't know if I know how to explain this well. Like I was trying to explain this to someone yesterday, but like the conversations on LinkedIn, they come across as much more human. to me
Yeah.
than the conversations that I have on X, for example. I feel like on X, and again, like if you asked me this last year, I would have said X. Now, what I find with X specifically is there's too many keyboard warriors there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you post something and some people say you're wrong, and you're like, cool, why? And then they disappear. Like it's like, and I guess I've seen this happen on, like, I'm not posting anything to TikTok personally, but I've seen this happen in the comments on TikTok as well, where people just go to say, no, you're wrong. I hate your point of view here, but there's not a lot of like, but why? Like, tell me why. Like, tell me why you don't like this. And again, like, I know that, like, especially on LinkedIn, like some of my takes can be a little like hot. They can be a little spicy, but I really enjoy when people come and say, hey, I disagree with this because of this.
Right.
Like, I really enjoy that because I feel like those platforms, they're not meant to be echo chambers. Like, they're not meant to be like a place where I go and say something and no one can reply. Like, they're meant to kind of like just be this kind of like communal place where you go, you have a conversation, you have a discussion. You don't all need to agree with what each other are saying, but there's respect. And that's the thing. Like, I feel like on LinkedIn, at least to the size of my account, to like what I do on LinkedIn and the people that I kind of like, usually socialize with, there's definitely respect.
Right.
Whereas I feel like on X, sometimes there's a bit of a lack of respect where people just go like, oh yeah, I hate what you're saying, I hate what you're doing. Like, right. So like, where do we go from here? Like, you just said you hate me, but like, where do we go from here? Like, do I just take that? And so, yes, I would say, like, right now, LinkedIn is kind of like the place where I put kind of like most of my attention, but also because I learn a lot from it. Like, I learn a lot from like a lot of posts that I see. I like going and commenting on things and kind of like starting discussions. So like for me, that's kind of the place.
Yeah, I mean, I also noticed that because lately I'm so active on Twitter just
Hmm.
to see what's happening there because there's a lot of fuzz around, okay, Twitter is doing this and that. But what I'm experiencing is that LinkedIn has some professional boundaries and like it's healthy bound,
Right.
right? And it's you feel you are in a professional setting and you can't say any some like shits, right?
Huh? Yeah.
But in Twitter, like it's very, I mean, you can't just tell anybody to stop or just complain. It's just like the free platform. Anybody can say anything, and you don't have any choice to say okay that's wrong. It's just
Yeah.
very normal.
And we know that sometimes on social media, people tend to cross a line, and they cross a line very, very far. Like, I don't get me wrong, I've got some hate DMs on LinkedIn as well. And it happens, but I think that the reality with LinkedIn, and it's exactly what you said. It's like it is kind of like tied to like being a professional environment. So in a way, like, if in most cases, if you're on LinkedIn, you work for a company or you work for someone, and it's unlikely that you're gonna cross line by making a terrible comment on someone's post. Whereas I feel like on X, and it's likely the same on TikTok, because like they're much more personal, like they're much more personal accounts.
Right.
People will sometimes kind of like cross a line, and they cross a line very, very far. And that for me is like, we live in the wars that we're living right now, is like it's not perfect, but I feel like if there's at least like some professional boundaries on it, people will behave. Okay. And again, like I said, there's been cases where like I got like, DMs that just kind of like came across as really bad. And I'm like, look, I'll just kind of like choose to ignore this. But then again, I feel like people are much more, they feel much more restrained from doing this because, if I click on their profile, I can see who they are. I can
Yeah.
see where they live. I can see where they work.
Yeah.
And if I decide to kind of like make a complaint about them, which is not something that I've done, but like if I decide to, it's much easier. Okay, so it's much more, it feels like being at work. Like, your colleague at work isn't gonna, hopefully, like a colleague at work won't make like a comment that is inappropriate because you're at work, and like LinkedIn kind of feels professional in that way, which is something that I like.
Maybe one more thing is YouTube has very great guardrails. LinkedIn also has great, and Meta also has the great guardrails, but Twitter don't have that. And hope so in future we will have, and we don't face these issues.
Yeah, I felt like with X, like account verification was gonna fix that, but it doesn't, because it
No,
seems
no,
like
no, it's
anyone
not.
can, as long as you pay like $8 a month, you can verify your account. I saw it the other day. Someone that I actually know got their account hacked on X, but it's a verified account. So there's someone actually tweeting on their verified. It's kind of crazy to think about it, but it's like there's someone tweeting on their verified account now as if it was them, but it's not, because their accounts got hacked. And it's like, hey, so like account verification doesn't really like, as long as you're willing to pay $8 a month, then you can have a verified account. So like that doesn't protect anyone from anything.
Right.
Whereas I think, when I think about account verification, is like it should be a much more kind of like stringent process where if you break the rules, then you can get in trouble. Like it should be like this.
Yeah, yeah, like it should be. So I think we are in the end of this podcast, but I really want from you, like, what's the one advice you want to give to our audience?
I would say, don't be afraid of trying things, okay? And the reason I say this is, when I last year, when I decided to start my company, I left my job, and it was like, it was a well-paid job. It was kind of like, I was comfortable and everything. I left my job because I felt like life is too short, and I wasn't like YOLOing it or anything. Like obviously, I had my savings and all, but I felt like life was too short, and I was like, look, I just want to do something that makes me really happy every day. And I wasn't doing it. Okay, like I wasn't doing something that made me happy every day. I really miss coding. Like I didn't have time to write any more code on the kind of like, the regularity that I have right now, or the one that I would have liked. And yeah, I left my job, and I was like, now I just need to figure something out. And it took me a few months to figure it out. Again, this is why it's important to kind of like just have your savings and everything, and be ready for like, what's to come. But it was like the absolute best move I could have ever made. Like, I don't think I've ever regretted kind of like making that move. Like I don't regret it, at any time right now. It's the absolute best move, because I do what truly makes me happy. And I genuinely only work with people that I really like.
Right.
And I say this because it's kind of the beauty of like working for yourself, because you get to pick your customers. Whereas like when you work for a company, you don't get to pick your manager, or like, who you work with. And like sometimes you like a lot of people, sometimes it's going to be someone you don't. But I get to pick my customers. I get to pick the people that I work with. So like I genuinely like, there's never a day where I feel like, oh, I'm gonna have to go to work again. My God, like, I don't feel that way. Whereas, I was talking to a friend on the other side, and this friend was like, oh my God, it's almost Monday, it's almost the 5th, and I'm gonna have to go to work. And I'm like, I can't wait to go to work. It's like, I'm really excited. There's so many things to do. So yeah, my advice is like, don't go crazy with like, yes, I'm gonna quit and I'll, just do something, but just go after the things that you love, and try and do the things that you love. And if you do it, like, things will work out. Okay. You just like, yeah, just try doing, most of the things that you love.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the advice. Like every time I talk to some founders, this is the exactly what they say. You just start and you're going to enjoy it, enjoy it. And I think it's all about the people, because you
Yeah.
love your work, because you like the people you are, working with. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, and the thing about being a founder is like, and I'm sure you hear this from other founders as well, like you end up working more. Okay, like, I don't work any less than I did before. Like, and you end up working more, but you definitely have more purpose. And it's definitely way more fun. Okay, like sometimes it's chaotic, but it's way more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's great talking to you, Marcus. I know we have lot of things to discuss and to share, but hope we will have the another episode of this and we can, deep dive into the business strategy a lot and what other people should also do. So thank you so much for coming.
Of course, yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we get to do this again.
Yeah, of course.